And here we are in what can only be described as an oasis of calm and coolness with Claire Fox. Very good morning to you, Claire.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's nice to be sitting indoors, isn't it, on a day like this?
It is actually perfectly temperatured in this room, if that's a word even.
Unusually, because normally it's either too hot or too cold in here, because we never quite get it right. But actually, my son's up visiting, doing a work experience week here, and we actually were sitting in my flat yesterday afternoon. I went, let's just go back to the office, it's too hot. And it actually was, you know, because I haven't got air conditioning, most people haven't.
No.
And I mean, while, yes, there are people who can suffer badly in the hot weather, like old people and particularly young babies, but I mean, for most of us, you should just enjoy it, shouldn't you?
Look, it's a joy. I don't in any way want to complain about the fact we're having a summer. And, you know,
exactly.
As much as we can whinge and moan, the reality is it's beautiful weather. It's not always nice working when you've got this weather. But, you know, God, think of the grimy, cold, windy, rainy kind of summers that we have had and can have.
I was talking to one of the ladies in the makeup department, Vanessa, who's from Australia. And I said, you know, and we were both saying, you know, in Australia it gets this hot every year. In New York City, where I used to live, it's this hot all the time for about 8 weeks.
Well,
and,
I think you're probably talking...
Trains don't stop running. People don't fall down on the ground.
I think that you are going to talk about this later, but it's worth noting the hangover from the lockdown era, which is endless warnings about this is an emergency. Take bottles of water with you, you know, as though people are children, you know, it's very hot.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Don't
Have you got your sun cream?
Yeah.
All this kind of thing. And I think that when I hear them saying this is part of the climate emergency, there's a heat wave emergency, you immediately know they're going to start, as you implied, saying, so you don't have to come into work, you don't have to do this. And you just think, we have to, as grown-ups, negotiate the weather when it changes.
Exactly.
And this is not the worst and most difficult challenge that we've ever had.
And you'll have had a rich history with trade unions and dealing with them and working sometimes in them or out of them. But they've now seen, they've sort of turned into any excuse not to go to work, the trade unions. It's like, it's too hot for us to go to work, so we're not going to work.
Yeah, I don't know if I recognise that about the trade unions, but it's certainly true that people are saying it's too hot to go to work.
Well, the trade unions are saying that now.
Are they?
Yeah.
All of them?
Well,
which ones?
Some of them
anyway,
are.
some of them are. But I mean, that's what I'm saying is that I just don't like that kind of concept in which we say we can't cope. This is just a ludicrous way of dealing with what is a very pleasurable thing, which is lovely, warm weather. We should also bear in mind, because it's really important, that it means you can turn the heating off. And for an awful lot of people, maybe the trade unions, I mean, in view of the fact that politicians aren't doing very much about energy prices.
No, nothing.
I think if a bit of natural weather is intervened, that means that we're warm enough without putting the heating on. And all that stuff about people saying, I'm getting on a bus in order to keep warm. And we have got, coming down the line, a very serious problem.
We have.
So I think let's enjoy this.
Well, let's enjoy it. The big story doing the rounds this morning, before we get on to the Tory hopefuls, Claire, is Mo Farah, which is an interesting one. It came out last night. There's a BBC documentary that's been done where it turns out that all the stuff that we thought we knew about Mo Farah turns out not to be true. I'm not Mo Farah. Here's the headline on the front page of The Sun. It turns out he made up details about moving to the UK. He previously claimed to have joined his dad, but he was actually killed in the Somalian civil war. You know, I don't take this to view Mo Farah in any way whatsoever differently from what he is, because what he's achieved has been remarkable. But what I do think is interesting is that it turns out he was trafficked here and worked as a slave, effectively, in the young, early years of his life. Without his family, he was given to some other family. And for me, it really highlights the problem that we've got with these illegal migrants coming, because I keep trying to tell people, these do-gooders who go, oh, they're fleeing, you know, war zones and all that. These people are being trafficked here for nefarious purposes, quite often into slavery, quite often into sex trafficking, quite often into all sorts of criminal activity. And people don't seem to be understanding that.
Well, actually, it's a remarkable story, and you can see the movie being made anytime soon. And if it does make me think differently about Mo Farah, it's like, what a remarkable story that is. The little lad at 9 years old, taken from his family, wrenched and became somebody's domestic slave, as you say, over here, and had to look after people, you know, other people's children. And he got through it, and he's Mo Farah. I mean, as we know him, right? I mean, what resilience does that take, right?
And he is a guy with a very easy demeanour, isn't he? You wouldn't know it.
You also realise that he's like just ever so grateful that he got through that. But I think it's a barbaric story of a child being used in that way. I think you're right to draw attention to the fact that when you're trying to have a reasonable, rational debate about, for example, people coming over on boats and I'm much more liberal on immigration. As I always say to people, I'd be more liberal on economic immigration. But I do think that we're being sold a pot when we're told everybody's coming over is fleeing war and refugees and all the rest. And I think that this has drawn attention to what it really means when the people traffickers people traffic.
Yeah.
They don't all end up, by the way, as Olympian gold runners,
they certainly
right?
don't. And how many other kids came over at the same time who are now still slaves?
Exactly, or destitute, or had their lives ruined, or just abused as children.
Or who were maybe dead even.
But he was asked to tell a lie, wasn't he, as a child? He was asked to say that they were fleeing from a war. In other words, the very story that lots of people tell us, and he's now admitting, no, that wasn't true. It's completely contrived by people who were exploiting him and his family. And you can understand how it happened, but like you say, it at least should make those people who claim that anyone who just says a story when they arrive, you have to believe it.
Well, this is it. This is what we get all the time from the do-gooder sort of lefties who love the idea that, you know, we shouldn't have any borders and everybody should be able to come here and it has no impact whatsoever on families in this country, which it obviously does, but it's working-class families, so they don't really care. You know, this absolutely signals that how wrong they are. And
that's why I've always said about economic migration, if I can just clarify, that I think it's perfectly reasonable for some 18, 19-year-old lad, and it is usually lads, to say, I want a better life, right? And I want to go to London, I want to go to the UK, because this is where there is a better life, because I want decent job and I want decent money. But they get forced into this bad faith thing where instead of, you know, coming here and trying to do that, whether illegally, I would prefer to be more open about saying some of them, they're forced, as you say, by the do-gooder.
Yeah.
They know that what they have to say is, I'm fleeing a war.
Right.
I'm not coming to make money.
Yeah.
I'm not... I mean, it's an aspiration. I understand you want a better life.
Right.
But they're told to say, no, say you were persecuted. Say it was religious persecution. Say that you're gay and that they're homophobic in your country.
And all of those things happen.
And they do all happen. And the worst thing is it creates a bad faith atmosphere where those people who say, well, I don't believe they're all fleeing war, are they? They've come from France, what?
Exactly.
And then they're told they're racist. So it discredits real refugees fleeing wars.
Yeah.
And it means that we avoid having a conversation about, well, should we consider having more economic migration?
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's not a bad thing, right? These people are aspirational. All right,
well,
maybe I'll loot, but let's be honest about it.
Well, let's be honest about it, but you can't get the truth out of the government. I mean, I've asked continually different government ministers, I've asked people who are in charge of the migration committee at the House of Commons, where do these people go after they've been taken to the hotels? And the only answer I got, which was a wrong answer, was from the guy in charge of he was a Kent MP, I can't remember his name, in charge of the migration committee. He said, oh, they only stay in the hotels for about 3 or 4 days. And I'm like, that's not even... You know that's not true, because we get told all the time that hotels are booked up for months in advance because they've been booked up by Serco, who are making an absolute fortune out of this business. And we need to know where... If these are all people that are coming here to make themselves and their lives better and make Britain better, well, let's find out where they're going.
Yeah, no,
what jobs are they doing?
But also, imagine what it's like being holed up in those hotels. And I know people say, oh, they're in a hotel.
What's wrong?
No, but the reason I'm saying that is because we try and make heroes of people in the wrong kind of way. The Mo Farah story indicates that this is a pretty grim life, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's trying to say that they're having... And they're being used by political cowardice in a way. Do you know what I mean? They're shit from pillar to post, right? I don't think that's a good life, right? No. That's not the kind of life they want, or that we want them to have, or that they should be having.
Britain should not be a destination for human traffickers to send people. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Exactly right. But if you can't have the conversation, presumably they can't come forward and say, by the way, I never was fleeing from a war, but now I've got here, I've discovered that I'm being exploited by X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But you can't say that almost because
they're frightened they might get sent back. Exactly right.
So the whole thing is we're having a bad faith conversation, and we at least need to be open and honest about it.
Quite right. Speaking of open and honest, who do you fancy in the Tory leadership race?
Honest to God, it's been fascinating to watch the frontline official, the ministers and people like that, Rishi Sunak and the rest, Nadim Zahawi, all of them actually not doing very well. No. And what's been interesting is at least a few, not exactly anti-establishment, but different voices have come through.
Outsiders, you might say.
Outsiders. I mean, the person that I most have regard for is Kemi Badenoch. I mean, largely because she talks about the issues that I'm very concerned about in terms of free speech. Yeah. She had the temerity at an event at the House of Lords yesterday, not only to proclaim that she knew what a woman was, which as somebody pointed out, got her a cheer, which is pathetic.
Has
in a
become
way.
the most difficult question of all time, hasn't it?
She also turned up at that event,
Yeah.
and this was an event that was celebrating people like Mayor Forstater winning her case,
right.
the clarification on issues around gender ideology versus biological sex and so on. So it's quite controversial to turn up if you stand in an election to speak there. But what was worse was, or better for me, was she actually said that the online safety bill needed to go. I was like, I mean, that was like... And you think she's not doing that for any vote. I mean, you know, you're not meant to say that kind of thing. So, well done. She felt, to me, a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
People say she hasn't got the experience. That might well be true.
Yeah, but the people who have got the experience, we're all in a government that has got us where we are.
Exactly.
Why would we want them still to continue doing that?
There is nothing about the Rishi Sunak case that appeals to me whatsoever, because it's so slick.
Yeah.
And I do think... Yeah, where were you? You know, we'd been through the lockdown period. I mean, and even on the Brexit issue, because I'm still very passionate that Brexit is realised, and I don't really think there's a secret plot to get us back in the EU, although there are people who would water down what Brexit means. But what I haven't heard is any really inspiring sense of what taking advantage of Brexit would mean. And the truth of the matter is, those people who've been in the cabinet have been useless at that.
They have.
Boris gave a good talk, but it's almost like he underestimated the job he was given by the British people, which was not just to get us out of the EU, but to make Brexit Britain come alive, dynamic, with some sense of where we were going. And I don't think it's good enough to just say, well, we had COVID, what could he do?
No, because people say, oh, we had COVID, but let's face it, he managed to push the net zero conversation through.
He had a COP26.
That was the only thing that he was interested in.
He had a COP26 conference. He could have had something about, I don't know, new industries conference,
exactly.
right? He could have brought an international gathering of how we were going to industrialise the North.
Exactly.
He didn't do that, did he?
He didn't do any of that. Absolutely right. Claire, brilliant to talk to you.